Hi, this is Jeff Daniels. You're listening to Everything Fab Four on Salon.
Welcome to Everything Fab Four, a podcast focused on fun and intelligent stories about the Beatles. I'm your host, Ken Womack, music culture columnist for Salon.com and a Beatles scholar and historian. No other band, or popular phenomenon for that matter, has enjoyed the global impact the Beatles have and continue to have more than 50 years later. They are part of our human fabric. They created music that continues to bring people together, and just about everyone has their own Beatles story to tell, some that are surprisingly deep and unexpected. This show seeks to draw those stories out in interesting and insightful ways. Remember, it's a Beatles world, and everyone has a story. You're looking great. It's good to see you, and I understand you like the Beatles.
Oh, I love the Beatles. I think they're the greatest musical entity in the history of music. I'm talking about Bach, Beethoven, the guy who hit a bone on a rock back in the whole thing. They're the greatest it's ever been.
Well, I guess that's it for the podcast then. Thank you so much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, Darius Rucker. Today's guest is Darius Rucker, best known as the lead singer and rhythm guitarist of the Grammy Award-winning band Hootie and the Blowfish. A native South Carolinian, Darius met fellow band member Mark Bryan in 1986 while attending the University of South Carolina. After Bryan heard Rucker singing in the shower, the two became a duo, playing REM covers at local venues. They later recruited Jim "Sonny" Sonnefeld and Dean Felber to join the band. As a member of Hootie and the Blowfish, Rucker has recorded 7 studio albums: Cracked Rear View, Fairweather Johnson, Musical Chairs, Scattered, Smothered, and Covered, Hootie and the Blowfish, Looking for Lucky, and Imperfect Circle. Over the years, Hootie and the Blowfish have sold more than 25 million albums and charted 6 top 40 singles, including Hold My Hand, Let Her Cry, and Only Wanna Be With You. Their debut LP, Cracked Rear View, ranks among the top 10 best-selling studio albums of all time. The multi-platinum Double Diamond LP has sold more than 22 million copies. Since releasing his first country album in 2008, Darius has earned a whole new legion of fans with 4 #1 albums on the Billboard Country chart, along with 10 #1 singles on country radio and 11 gold, platinum, or multi-platinum certified hits. Darius was inducted as a Grand Ole Opry member in 2012, and in 2014 he won his 3rd career Grammy Award for Best Solo Country Performance with the Diamond certified version of Wagon Wheel, one of the top 5 best-selling country songs of all time. In addition to releasing the solo album Carolyn's Boy, he published his first book, a memoir entitled Life's Too Short. Beginning in May, he will rejoin Hootie and the Blowfish for their Summer Camp with Trucks tour. Welcome, Darius Rucker. How did it all start in terms of this lifelong passion?
I think, my mom sang in the choirs, and my sister sang in choir and all that stuff, and my mom had an amazing voice. I mean, it was truly, amazing and much better than mine. And so she was always singing around the house, and I was always listening and trying to sing with her. And so I can't say we were a musical family where we all sat around and played instruments together, but music was very important in our household.
Well, that'll do it. And,
oh, yeah.
And this is from the earliest age, I take it.
Oh, goodness. I can't ever remember a time music wasn't always around. We always, during the week, somebody playing albums, and, church was really big for us, and the music in church was really big for us. So, yeah, my whole life, music's been very important.
What was the first instrument you picked up?
Drums were my first instrument. But, that was a long time ago. I haven't really played those seriously in a long time. And then I taught myself how to play guitar.
Nice. And what spurred that on? Just a natural.
Just the love for music, wanting to. The drums was because that's what the school, in school when you're taking, band and everything, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a drummer, so I learned to be a drummer, and guitar was really because I wanted to sit around and just play, and and be in Hootie the Blowfish and play guitar in there. So that's why I taught myself how to do that.
Just natural transitions then. So obviously the Beatles are an influence. Can you tell us about your moment of discovery?
Oh goodness, that's a great story. My mom, we had one of those big hi-fis that had the turntable and instead of having like I guess a lot of people had used the cabinet as a liquor cabinet. We used that as our records cabinet. My mom had hundreds of records, hundreds of albums and 45s down there. And I remember, I guess I was probably five, so it was probably 71 or so. I'm just looking through the 45s and I came across these two Beatles 45s. And I remember asking my mom, well, because it was all R&B. I don't think there might have not been another white group in the whole collection. And I asked my mom why she had those two 45s, and she said, Darius, everybody had those two 45s. And so I would sit there and just play them over and over and just fell in love with the Beatles. And as soon as I got older and started working, I started working when I was 13 or 14, buying Beatles albums and just learning the greatness of what the Beatles were.
Do you remember what those two 45s were?
It was the first. It was "Please Please Me." Saw Her Standing There, and goodness, I can't remember what the flip side was. But they, they were really the first two that came out. Those were the first two singles. Yeah.
What do you think it is? What was it that we're the same age, and roughly speaking, and I remember when I first heard them, which was I was a later bloomer than you. 1977, the cartoon showed up.
Oh yeah.
One day when I was having my cereal, the Beatles were on instead of my normal show, and the cartoons were terrible. But what I loved was the song.
music.
I thought,
Yes.
what the hell has this been?
Yes, I remember the cartoons.
And I haven't heard this. I think the first one I heard may have been Help. But anyway, what was it, do you think, that was so arresting for you?
I think it was the lyrics were so, even though they were so simple, they just brought you in. Like, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. That was, for me, that was what a hook. And that was when I didn't even know what a hook was. But I mean, that I just wanted to sing that over and over and over. And I mean, the musicianship of what they were doing. I mean, because I think up until that point, my whole music, the music to me was Al Green and Gladys Knight the Pips and the Temptations and the Supremes and all. And then here I put on a Beatles record and they sound nothing like anybody else. They sound only like them. I just love the voices and the harmonies and even as a kid, I remember just thinking about the drums, the toms, because you listen to a lot of records back then when we were a kid and nobody played the toms. Nobody did. And Ringo would just play the toms and that little second of that low beat would catch my ear and I'd go and sit on my, sit in the couch and try to pretend that I'm doing what he did. It was, I think it was just the musicianship of what they were doing. They were just better than everybody else. And I knew it when I was 5.
Yeah, it's the same thing that happens, right? With a kid today, you hear it and it's like walking through a looking glass.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it still happens to kids today. I think kids today who, listening to the new music and everything that's going on, you put on Abbey Road and you can't help, you have to say that's just great. You can't deny it. That's just great.
I was talking to previous guest George Benson the other day about this, and he was talking about Abbey Road, and he didn't have much use for the Beatles, but then he heard Golden Slumbers, and he thought, wait a minute, what is this?
Sure. I mean, for me, I think I saw something today where Apple Music was doing their top 10 albums of all time, and Abbey Road was number 3. and I physically got angry. And I think the two records in front of him were like Purple Rain and Lauryn Hill. That which two records I love. Two records
They're great albums.
amazing records. They're just not better than Abbey Road.
Yeah.
Abbey Road just for me, when I put that record on, I can't be around the house and put that album on and just listen to a couple songs. I have to listen to that whole record because I think it is the most perfect album ever made.
Well, and then once you roll into the medley,
When you get to the second, first of all the songs are great, but when you get to side B, and the songs just don't stop, and every song is brilliant. She came in through the bathroom window. It comes out of nowhere. It comes out of nowhere, and Paul just yells, "Came in through the bathroom window," and then lays down that bass line that's just so crazy, and I don't know. Abbey Road for me is the best record ever made. I've never heard a record better.
and top to bottom, the songwriting, of course,
Every
is
song, and that's something that I always talk about when I talk about to my friends about the Beatles. George Harrison got a song, a record. Maybe, I think on Revolver he got two or maybe three, and so it's called George's record. And he's one of the greatest songwriters of all time. And he only got one or two songs a record, and that is they never disappointed. Every record you listen to is a great record. Just some are better than others.
and the thing that confounds me, and maybe it's the reason I still write about them and think about them. I think it is the extraordinary aspect that they go from those great early songs that you were talking about earlier through Abbey Road. That's like 7 careers in 7 years. They're never the same.
Yeah, their move from She Loves You and Please Please Me to Abbey Road, or to even before Abbey Road, to Sergeant Pepper. It's such a maturity, but they're all great, and it's like they just kept growing and getting better and realizing, writing better songs, and not, I would say better songs. Just all their songs are great. I'm not going to say that, those early songs, Meet the Beatles and all those records are great records, because they are great songs. But then when you get to, Hey Jude, I mean, wow, that may be the greatest song ever written.
And how do you do that, though, as an artist? And you would, I think, be far better at understanding this than I ever could be. How do you go in that short period on that journey? No wonder everybody thought Paul was dead. I mean,
Yeah.
surely they had to have another guy to make that trip.
Yeah, I saw a great interview the other day with Ringo, and he was saying that if it wasn't for Paul, they wouldn't have made that many records. He said if it wasn't for Paul, they would have probably made half the records they made. Because Paul was a workaholic, and he was also a genius. One of probably my favorite documentary ever was that Get Back documentary that just came out. And you sit and you get to watch them write some of the greatest songs ever written, and you're watching them write it right there in the studio. And it's just a moment where their genius just shines. But you also, how they did it with the way they felt about each other at some times. It's
And
amazing.
four-track recording.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's just amazing. And like I said, the Beatles, for me, I could talk about the Beatles 24 hours a day, because I just think they're the most important thing in musical history.
And you say that to me, and I accept it as a truism. I think that will continue to evolve. The way people think about them.
Absolutely.
I can't imagine.
I mean, everybody is influenced by the Beatles. Rap bands, they might not know it, but they're influenced by the Beatles. Reggae bands, they might not know it, they're influenced by the Beatles. R&B bands, they don't know it, but they're influenced by the Beatles, because the Beatles did so much. And the way we record music, they changed the way people recorded music. And I just, I don't know. I've said it already 3 times today, but the Beatles for me is it. I mean, everybody else has to line up behind them.
You know, part of I use a metaphor in my Beatles class every fall that they're like the Big Bang Theory. 13 billion years ago, the Big Bang occurred and it still reverberates in the universe, right? We know this scientifically.
Yes.
That's kind of how rap artists and country artists and every genre and walk of life are influenced, even like you said, as they don't know it. When you started writing songs, tell me about how that kind of manifestation occurs, right? Because playing instruments, people have done that. You picked it up, you had an affinity and an aptitude. How does that transform into songwriting?
Oh, I mean, I just wanted, the one thing I didn't want to do is I didn't want to pretend like I could write songs like the Beatles because nobody could write, McCartney and Lennon, Harrison, even Ringo, the song Ringo wrote, or just this far and above. But I just, for me, playing an instrument, playing guitar and writing songs just came together. It just came together. I mean, the chords are, we all use the same chords. We all use the same notes. And so, once I started playing guitar, I just wanted to write. I just wanted to write my own songs and see what happens.
So how did something happen? How did you go from playing at home and et cetera, and transforming that into a career?
Now, once I met Mark in college and we decided we were going to try to play together, we were playing covers, but we started writing. We just started trying to find out what we wanted our sound to be, what we wanted to sound like, what we wanted to be like, what we wanted to say. And so you just write. And like for me, like when I write a song today, the hardest thing for me to do is figure out what I want to write about. Then once you figure out what you want to write about, just talk. Just tell the truth. Just 3 chords in the truth is the greatest thing ever said. I don't remember who said that, but that's just true. 3 chords in the truth. And then, you have a song. It might be a bad song, but you got a song.
There's an energy to your music that is arresting, like the Beatles. I know you don't like that comparison, but I remember the first time I heard you, it was there was an energy to it, and it's that energy. That's the energy, and she came in through the bathroom window, right? It comes out of nowhere, but you have to listen to it. And I remember hearing for the first time your work and having that same kind of experience. Um, how did you guys keep the band going, right? Especially during college. It's a pretty turbulent time. It's easy to get lost in other parts of our lives. Real life starts to creep in much earlier than people think, right? All you need to do is have a car payment or a girlfriend or
yeah,
not help you a mortgage, right? I mean,
oh yeah, and we went through all that, and we saw a lot of our friends who were in bands stop being in bands because of, a girl or having to work or having to get a real job to pay the bills or whatever, because for a long time we didn't, we were a band 7 years before we got a record deal. And so it's like there's a lot of times you struggled, but for us, the music kept us together and the music kept us going. And also, seeing 75 people at that club that you played last 6 weeks ago that only had 50 people. Now there's 75. So the crowd's growing, and we all we wanted to make it. We just wanted to play music.
yeah, sticking it out is the toughest thing for any group.
Absolutely. I really, when we played, there was a huge scene from New York down to Florida and then to Kentucky and Tennessee, and just a huge bar scene where you could play the same bars every 6 weeks and make a living, and I look back at that time and only us and Dave Matthews pretty much remained from that, and there were hundreds of bands that were doing it. And that is, I guess a testament to us as bands, but also to the music we were making, and finally people wanted to hear it.
Yeah. So what got you in the orbit of the record label so that you guys could make that transition?
we made our last EP called Coochie Pop and sold it out of the back of our van at shows and at mom and pop record stores in the Carolinas and Georgia and stuff, and we were just selling a lot of them. I think we sold like 65,000 copies of that. And because, grunge was king at the time and nobody was looking for this little, pop rock band from South Carolina. No one was looking for that music. But we were selling so many records, everybody had to come see what was going on. And then everybody tried to sign us. We signed with Atlantic and, I guess the rest is history. But that's what it was. It was just putting out that Coochie Pop EP and just really busting our butts and selling it.
So it was kind of like proof of proof of concept in a way.
Yeah, we were proving not just through the record sales, but also through the butts we were putting in seats. We were selling at every place. We were selling these big 2,000 seat clubs, 3,000 seat clubs, every 6 weeks. And so people came down and they were like, "Wow, who's this Hootie the Blowfish band?" Well, okay, let's see what we can do with them.
How did could you share with our listeners how the name came about?
Oh goodness, we were looking for a name for the band. Mark and I were the Wolf Brothers when we were a duo, and we were looking for a band name. And I was in this show choir in college called Carolyn Alive, and I had two buddies. One guy had really big eyes and wore glasses, and so I started calling him Hootie. And then everybody in the choir started calling him Hootie. And his best friend and roommate had these huge cheeks, and he was a trumpet player, and he could do that Dizzy Gillespie thing. And so I started calling him Blowfish. And so everybody started calling him Blowfish. That was just their nicknames in our group of friends. And they walked into a party one day, and I think we had our first show a week after this. And they walked into a party one day, and I just said, "Look, Hootie the Blowfish." And I lied to myself and said, "What a great name for a band," which it's not. But I went. I said, "Let's call ourselves Hootie the Blowfish," and no one said no. And everybody's like, "Okay, whatever." And the whole thing was that if we need to, we'll change it. But once you start playing out there and getting more and more people, you can change it because that's what people know.
It's the brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then you had this 7-year apprenticeship. You sign with the big label. And then it all happens, seemingly out of nowhere.
The first record on a major label was really, that's the one that sold 22 million copies.
Yeah, I had a friend who worked for Atlantic for many years, and he said that the Hootie and the Blowfish effect was real inside the company. It was. Hello.
And the thing is, nobody believed in it. The only people that believed in it was the guy who signed us, Tim Summer, and the president of the label, Danny Goldberg, at the time. And one guy who was a big wig up at the label actually told Danny that if they put out Correct Review, that Atlantic was going to be the laughing stock of music. Yeah, that's a direct quote of what somebody said to Danny Goldberg. Yeah.
So what motivates a quote like that?
It wasn't grunge, and grunge was king. Grunge was king. Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, they were dominating the radio, and, record sales were down across the board and everything, but that's what was going on. And so we weren't. And so he listened to it, and he told Danny that we should shelve it and not put it out. And, I still thank Danny Goldberg to this day for going, "No, we're going to put it out." They didn't work it. It wasn't, they weren't working it. We had maybe 3 radio stations in the South played it, and all the radio stations of the clubs that we were playing, had picked up Hold My Hand and were playing it. And they weren't working it. They weren't out there busting their butts trying to get us on the radio. And then Letterman happened, and life changed.
There's so many lessons in there, and I love to share these with our students. One is major label support doesn't happen until something occurs that merits it, right? It's not like you've just given an object lesson in that. It's not like they come out of the gate saying it's going to be Hootie and the Blowfish. It was the tail wagging the dog in a way, right?
Absolutely. And then after a big success in another record, then, they'll back off on you. Labels are tough. That's why I always say to my label, my country label, Capitol, I thank them all the time because I know what it's like to be with a shitty record label. And it sucks. It sucks when you put out a record that changes the label, that makes $1 billion for the label, and then they'll just pretend like you don't exist. That sucks.
And it's so myopic, right? Because, you know, there's no attention to development. Now, obviously, you guys blew the idea of development out the window since you came out of the gate like that. But, you know, you can look back at the 70s and see all sorts of albums where a band got several shots before they gave up on them.
I mean, it was different back then, like when, by the time we were making records, it was what are you going to do for me right now? It wasn't about developing bands it's like, come on, you got to do it right now, or we're just going to forget that you exist.
Well, and the same thing was true with novelists, right? When we were
Absolutely.
kids, the novelists John Irving had 3 bum novels before he came out with Garp.
Yeah, exactly.
The label stayed with him, and then they were really glad they did. Yeah.
I really think,
the other lesson is the paradigm shift, right? So grunge is happening. I remember it well. But like you said, it's different sound comes along and people take notice. And the folks at Atlantic, I guess some were not seeing the paradigm shift.
Absolutely not. And that's I think that's one of the reasons Cracked Review was so big. I think it's a great record. But I think one of the reasons it was so big is it was different. Grunge was so dark and heavy, and we came out and said, "Hold my hand," and people were like, "Wow, all right, that's something positive. Let's go listen to that for a minute."
And it's just well played, well written music. I mean,
that's the one thing that when a record does that well, you can say whatever you want about it, but you have to admit that it was great. You have to. I mean, that's one of the top 10 selling records of all time. You
know how this is, right? There were so few bands that my dad and I would listen to together. And I remember when you guys came out and we're looking at each other and we're like, yep, it's just something we enjoy together. It also crossed demographics in a lot of ways, right? It just wasn't young kids.
Yes.
It wasn't just, a kind of middle of the road audience. Everybody, it had guitar in it. So, you guys could rock. It was all there.
It was really one of those records that, like you said, we saw it in our shows from 6 to 66. It crossed so many demographics and so many people, I guess, kind of flocked to it because it was grunge was a young person's game. It was for people in high school and college. It was just straight out or just out of college. That's where there weren't any grandparents listening to that, but Hootie the Blowfish came around and, they were grandparents and parents. Like you said, you and your father agreeing that, we can listen to this together.
Yeah, we never listened to Pearl Jam together.
Yeah, but I think that was one of the reasons for the success.
Well, and like I said, you just can't overlook that kind of songwriting either. And how do you follow up a 22 million seller? Did you feel pressure over that?
Yeah, of course, and it's like I heard Stuart Copeland say this the other day. You got 7 years to write your first record, then you got 4 months to write the next one. And you go and you do it, and you hope you made a great record, but it's just a different thing, and you got to follow it up. And something I said this every day when we were making the record. We are never going to match that success. If we sit here and we start determining our success on comparing it to Crack Review, we're going to always be disappointed because that record's we're never going to top that. Not a lot of people have. And so that's how we went about it. Just let's make the record we want to make, and what happens, happens.
Yeah.
Then you sell 5-6 million copies and it's considered a flop.
It's like Fleetwood Mac after Rumors, right?
Exactly.
No moves.
Exactly.
There's no play.
Yeah. There's nothing you can do.
And of course, there's plenty to like after that first album.
I mean, there's I think we write really good songs, and we did on that record. I think we have on all of our records. It's just, we just had a moment in time that just transcended everything.
So, what is it like to transition into becoming an author?
Oh, that was different.
Yeah,
That was different.
I'm here to say, Life's Too Short is a really well crafted book.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, but did it feel different to work in that genre?
Oh, totally different. Writing a book is totally different than writing a song. I mean, the great thing about writing the book though is I got to just tell a story. That's what I try to do with my songs. But you didn't have to write a hook; just tell the story. And that's the one thing I wanted to really do with this book is be honest and just tell the story the way it happened and how I saw it. Tell my
It
story.
feels like you're talking to me in the book.
That's what we were going for. That's how I wanted to write it. I wanted to write it like we were sitting down having a conversation.
What sort of things did you discover through that process?
Oh goodness. One thing that really punched me in the gut was I didn't realize how much my non-relationship with my dad affected me until I wrote the book. Because you go on with your life, he was never really around, and you go on with your life, and at some point you just forget about it. At some point it's just not something you think about anymore. And then when I was writing the book, I realized just looking at everything how much it affected me. And that was really huge for me. Man, my therapist had a good time with that one. Yeah, that was huge. That was huge. That was huge for me.
And there's good reason for that, right? Because real life dominates you.
Yeah,
You are on a kind of treadmill.
you said it. I mean, real life goes on. Life goes on. You can't sit around and think about this stuff or harp on this stuff all day because life is going to go on. And when it does, you put it, all that stuff, all the trauma and all the stuff that you go through, you just put it on the back burner and go on with life. And I didn't really think about it until I wrote about it. Then, you know, reading it back and going, wow, that really affected me. That was something that really came across to me.
And does it change how you think about that relationship in the past?
No, not at all. I mean, it really more solidified the truth, the reality of the whole situation.
And without the book, right, we in a way you didn't have the occasion to tell that story or to take such a deep look.
Exactly. Exactly. Without the book, I wouldn't have looked at it the way I did.
There's a there's a great line, I think it's on Springsteen's Western Stars album at the end when he's explaining how life takes over. He says it's kids and bills and bills and kids.
Yeah, that's it. That's the
Yeah,
truest thing. Yeah, that's what it is. And that's even, at my age, even now, with my kids being adults, it's still kids and bills and kids.
that's right. They call up, they need something.
Yeah, always, always.
That's okay. That's why we're here.
Hey, I love them. I love them. I love them. I'm always here for them. Always.
How is it that so many bands break up? Creative differences are real, right? You know,
Yeah.
how do you stick it out?
I think we have so much respect for each other. Like even when we decided to stop touring every year, when we decided to stop being a touring band, it was never discussed breaking up. I mean, that was never, no one said, let's break up. We just said, all right, we're not going to play much anymore, but we'll play when we play. It was 15 years between tours, but it still was, we knew we were going to play again someday. And for us, I mean, we like each other. We got a lot of respect for each other. Um, so when it's time to get together and play, we fall right back into the same hierarchy and everything that we have, and we go do what we do.
And it probably is refreshing to play those old songs again.
It is now because we don't do it very often. So when we do it, it's great and refreshing and fun to go back out there and play those old songs that meant so much to us. Especially the songs that we used to play in the clubs that we still play. Playing "Let Her Cry," that's just awesome.
Oh
I
yeah, the
mean,
vocal, the whole business. It's a fantastic tune.
yeah, that's just a great feeling to get up and play that song, knowing that we played that in a club to four people.
And it must mean a lot to know how much those songs mean to your audience.
Well, absolutely. That's the best part of it. That like the folks that make it and have hits and don't want to play their hits or play their hits begrudgingly. I don't get that because when we hit that when we hit the G of Let Her Cry, and we play a lot of G's in our show, but when we hit that G, it seems like everybody knows what's coming, and the sound of the crowd. You have in-ears now, and the sound of the crowd just floods into your ear, and that's what it's all about. Meaning something to people like that. That's pretty awesome.
Everything Fab Four is presented by Salon.com, the premier news, politics, innovation, and arts website. For more information, visit everythingfab4.com, where you can learn more about our podcast and my latest Beatles-related book, Living the Beatles Legend, The Untold Story of Mal Evans. The Everything Fab Four theme song, Seize the Day, is provided courtesy of Black Rabbit, the high-octane Beatles cover band, an innovative psychedelic rock project from Rockaway Beach, Queens in New York City. Like what you heard today on Everything Fab Four? Be sure to subscribe, give us a rating, and recommend the show to your friends. Plus, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at EF4 Podcast. Distributed by Salon.com, Everything Fab Four is a Wonderwall production. Remember, it's a Beatles world, and everyone has a story.